Okay, so becoming an import-export manager. Not gonna lie, when you said we were covering this, I thought, how dry. But flipping through this stuff, it's way more interesting than I expected.
It's definitely got a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Right. Global trade,
Yeah.
regulations, cultural differences feels like a lot to juggle.
It definitely keeps you on your toes, that's for sure. And you're right, it's not just about moving boxes from point A to point B. What's fascinating to me is how much these sources emphasize the people side of the job.
Yeah, I saw negotiation skills about 100 times.
Ugh.
I get that it's international, but I was surprised by how much emphasis there is on really building relationships across cultures.
It's absolutely crucial. This career guide actually starts with a story about a deal that almost fell apart because they misread the client's body language. Turns out a nod in one culture doesn't always mean yes in another.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a costly miscommunication.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about this career guide. It looks like it breaks the career path down pretty clearly, from entry-level coordinator all the way up to, like, running the whole show.
Exactly. And it's interesting how the role changes as you move up. At the coordinator level, it's a lot of hands-on logistics, customs forms, tracking shipments, all that. But then you move up to, say, an import-export specialist.
Wait, there's a difference between a coordinator and a specialist.
Yeah.
Eh?
Think of the specialist as the next level.
Yeah.
They're not just getting goods from A to B, they're analyzing global market trends, identifying new opportunities. They might be the one who convinces their company to start importing alpaca wool from Peru, for example.
Alpaca wool.
Yeah, because they've spotted that growing demand for sustainable textiles.
So less about paperwork, more like being a trend spotter almost.
With a heavy dose of logistics and data analysis, of course. The guide mentions that these days specialists are using some really sophisticated software and tools to keep track of everything. I mean, we're talking shipping costs, political instability in a region. It's a lot. This isn't just intuition. There's some serious number crunching happening.
Okay, so you need to have a head for numbers A and D, be a bit of a visionary. That does sound intense. No wonder the guide mentions high stress levels as a potential downside, huh?
Right alongside high earning potential, of course. Look, there's a learning curve, and it can be stressful, but that's where those certifications come in. The CITP, CCS, CGBP, they show you've got the knowledge to handle it.
Okay, pause for a sec. You just threw a bunch of acronyms at me. It's like alphabet soup over here. What does it all mean?
Sorry, jargon reflex. CITP stands for Certified International Trade Professional. CCS is Certified Customs Specialist. And then you've got CGBP, the Certified Global Business Professional. Each one shows expertise in a certain area of import-export.
So it's like leveling up your character in a video game. You need those certifications to unlock new opportunities, tackle bigger challenges.
I like that analogy, and it really gets at this idea that in this field, you never really stop learning. The regulations change, markets shift, there's always something new to master.
So someone's listening to this right now. Maybe they're just starting to think about import-export. What's the one big takeaway they should leave with today?
That it's a more dynamic and frankly cooler field than most people realize. You're a problem solver, you're a cultural liaison, and a bit of a global detective, spotting those market shifts before anyone else.
And probably making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed on those customs forms while you're at it, right?
Absolutely. But beyond the paperwork, it's the human element, that ability to really connect with people from all over the world that makes this career so interesting.
It's funny, you don't often hear cultural liaison and customs forms in the
Yeah.
same sentence. But it seems like that's the heart of this job, right? Bridging those gaps.
It's a balancing act for
Yeah.
sure. And speaking of bridging gaps, you mentioned global market analysis. That's another area where those cultural nuances are so important.
Oh, how so?
Well, let's stick with the alpaca wool example from the career guide. It's not just about noticing a trend toward sustainable textiles. It's about understanding why consumers in a particular country are drawn to those materials. Are they motivated by environmental concerns, ethical production, or is it simply the unique qualities of the wool itself? Each of those factors would mean a different approach, a different marketing strategy.
So it's like being a cultural anthropologist almost. You have to understand the why behind the what.
Exactly, and that's something you develop over time through experience, research, and yeah, maybe even a little trial and error. Speaking of, let's say someone is listening to this and feeling totally inspired, wants to get their foot in the door. What would you recommend? Where do you even begin with a career like this?
Yeah, it feels like there's so much to learn.
It can seem daunting, but the career guide lays out some practical steps. Like internships are a fantastic way to get experience. Even if you're just assisting with the basics, you start to absorb the language, the processes, really get a feel for the nuances of the industry.
Right. You can't beat that hands-on experience.
Yeah.
Is that something you'd recommend even before going for those certifications we talked about?
Absolutely. Real world experience plus those certifications, it's a killer combo. But even before internships, networking can be so valuable. Attending industry events, connecting with people on LinkedIn,
All about who you know.
it definitely helps. But it's more than that. It's about building relationships, learning from others in the field, just getting your name out there. Speaking of networking and job hunting, have you heard of this new tool called RoleCatcher?
RoleCatcher. Rings a bell. Is that the one that helps you organize your job search? Tell me more. Anything that makes life easier.
Right. So they have this feature, RoleCatcher.capture, and it lets you save job postings from all these different websites. Think of it like a digital binder for your dream job hunt.
Okay, that's genius. I remember when I was job hunting, I had a million tabs open, constantly refreshing. What a nightmare.
Tell me about it. But anyway, going back to the career guide and those essential skills they highlight. It's not just knowing the ins and outs of customs forms. They emphasize things like active listening, critical thinking, even social perceptiveness.
Which makes sense given what we've talked about. You're not just dealing with cargo, you're dealing with people.
Exactly. And that's where those soft skills, those people skills become just as important as all the technical know-how. Take negotiation, for example.
Oh, right. We touched on that earlier. What is it they say? Everything's negotiable.
In import-export. Often true. Think about it. You're negotiating with suppliers to get the best possible price, with distributors to make sure deliveries are on time, maybe even with government agencies to navigate those tricky regulations.
You basically need to be a diplomat, fluent in the art of the deal.
You said it. It's all about finding common ground, building consensus, and in the end, securing a win-win for everyone involved. And honestly, those skills are helpful in every aspect of life, not just in the office.
You know, it's funny. When I pictured an import-export manager before we did this, before this deep dive, I have to admit, master negotiator wasn't the first thing I thought of.
I can imagine. But it really makes sense when you think about it. The stakes are high.
High stakes, for sure. And it's more than just negotiating, right? We've talked about it, the regulations, market trends, cultural differences. Seems like you got to be adaptable in this line of work.
Oh, it's essential. The career guide, actually, they had this great metaphor comparing it to navigating a maze that's constantly shifting. You think you've mastered the route, and then boom, a wall moves or a new path opens up. You've got to be able to think on your feet, adjust to new info, be okay with a certain amount of, well, uncertainty.
Tell me about it. This one time I was traveling in at this rural Finland. My flight got delayed and my luggage got lost. And I'd forgotten to download one of those offline translator apps.
Oh no, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It totally was. But you know what? I actually managed, using a combo of hand gestures, a really old phrase book I found in my backpack, and the kindness of strangers, I actually made it to my destination. Little frazzled, 2 days late, but I made it.
There you go, the epitome of adaptability. And hey, I bet you learned a thing or two about Finnish culture on the way.
I learned enough to say thank you and 2 beers, please, which, let's be honest, is all you really need. But it really showed me how sometimes those unexpected detours, those are the things that lead to the most memorable experiences.
And a lot of times those experiences are what make you a better import-export manager. Being able to stay calm when things get tough, finding creative solutions, building trust even when you're out of your element. Those are important skills to have.
So we're talking part logistics wizard, part cultural ambassador, part master negotiator.
Yeah.
With a little bit of world traveler thrown in for good measure.
Exactly. And if you're someone who thrives on that, who likes that things are always changing, that's where the excitement is.
I think that's what's so fun about doing these deep dives. You never know what you're going to uncover. For anyone listening who's thinking about jumping into this whole world of global trade, what's the one thing you would tell them?
Be bold, be curious, and never, ever stop learning. The world of import-export is huge, and it never stops changing. But approach it with the right attitude and those people skills we talked about. The possibilities really are endless.
Well said. From customs forms to alpaca wool, cultural faux pas, and the art of the deal. That's import-export, folks, here on The Deep Dive.
It's been great diving into all of this with you.
Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.